So I'm in Florida City, Florida, and this is considered the most dangerous city in the state of Florida. And Florida is considered the 29th most dangerous state in the United States. However, most of the cities don't submit crime data to the FBI, so it could be significantly worse than that. That's just, we're going by what numbers that, of the cities that do provide the information. And hopefully you can hear me okay. I got the Freedom panels out of my Jeep, and hopefully the wind noise isn't too much. But the population here is 12,000, and it's been declining since 2020. Not unlike a lot of US cities, 2020 really did a number here too, and people just started moving out. So it's 49% Hispanic, 47% black, and 2% white. So it's a fairly diverse, just not with any white people. The average age here is 28, which is really low. So it's a very young population. 16% of the population of the adults are seniors, which is also a little on the low side, but not too abnormal for a city with higher crime. And like a lot of cities that have high crime, the male-female ratio is off. It's 47% male to 53% female. And a lot of cities that have higher crime, that's a normal statistic for the city for whatever reason. I did have somebody comment on that and said the reason for that is probably more of the men are in prison and they're not being counted in the census, so that it shows more females than men. There's a 25% home ownership rate here, which is 60% lower than the national average, and might be part of the reason why they have higher crime. When people don't have a stake in the area where they live, if they're like transient and can move anywhere, like they're renting and they could, go move and buy a different place tomorrow or move to a different place the next day, they're not going to take as good a care of the place as they would if they have a house and they have some kind of stake in the city. The median home value here is $172,000, which is 7% lower than the national average. And the median rent is $12,000, which is 23% higher than the national average. And we're in more of the residential area just to check out what some of the houses look like, and I believe I'm heading towards the downtown. The average earnings here is around $30,000 a year, which is, even for a bad city, a little on the low side. There's a 33% poverty rate, which is very high. That's 1 in every 3 people that live here live below the poverty line, which also probably plays into why they have such high crime. And let's go this way. Most cities, the poverty rate isn't that high, but I was in Dillon, South Carolina, and the poverty rate there was actually 40%. So 33% poverty rate is really high, but there are cities that are higher. There's a 32% marriage rate, which is a little on the low side, but also fairly typical. 56% of the people that live here were born in either Florida City or in the state of Florida. So over half were born in the state of Florida or here. 33% are foreign born, and 21% are considered non-citizens. Overall, it doesn't look too bad. When you're driving through, the houses don't look too bad. And the city stopped providing crime data to the FBI in 2020. But prior to 2020, the murder rates were from 2017 to 2020, they were between 16.4 and 81.4. And the 81.4 is higher than even St. Louis. The 81.4 is a huge number. That's really high. You don't see murder rates hardly in the United States, hardly that high. Sometimes in smaller places that can't absorb the crime numbers like larger cities can. But for perspective, on the 81.4, Chicago, which has the most homicides of any city in America, their murder rate's only 22. So it's really high at 81. And St. Louis, I don't remember what St. Louis is, but it's in the upper 70s. And so it's higher here than even St. Louis. The assault rates, going back to 2009, so we're going way back, 15 years, are between 1,200 and 2,300 per year per 100,000 people. In 2020, the assault rate here, this was the last year they provided data to the FBI. The assault rate was 2,300 per 100,000 people. Memphis, which is one of the worst cities, like literally one of the worst, it ranks in the top 20, maybe even top 10 worst. Does this road go through? Top 10 or top 20 worst in the world is where Memphis ranks, and Memphis assault rate is only 2,000. You got the typical garbage everywhere on the sides of the roads because the city doesn't pay anybody to clean anything up. And the theft rates here are between 6,000 and 8,000 per 100,000 people. And that's super high. And again, these are numbers pre-2020. And the population is declining. So unless those numbers are declining, the crime numbers, the number on a per capita basis is only rising as they lose more people. As far as schooling goes, 48% of the students here graduate proficient at reading and math, and that is surprisingly good. In America, that's like super good right now, 48%. That's the US average right now is 48%. The state of Florida graduates on average 55% that graduate proficient at reading and math at a 12th grade level of reading and math. But only 55% of the people that live here have completed the 8th grade, and only 53% have a high school diploma. And 6% have a bachelor's degree or higher. So it's not a highly educated city. And if you do 48% of 53, so 48% is how many they're graduating, proficient at reading and math, of 53% that actually graduate, it's only 25%. So only 25% of the population here, of the residents that live here, are proficient at reading and math, can read and do math at a 12th grade level. And when you're producing numbers like that, it's really hard for a city to turn things around. You're not going to expect the crime numbers to go down at all when you have, a third of the population lives below the poverty line, and you have theft rates and assault rates and murder rates as high as they are. When you're not graduating the kids, you're not teaching them enough to go out and get good jobs. And likely the ones that do graduate, the 53% that do graduate, they're probably the ones that are leaving. And they're leaving the city. And we're going to get stuck behind the school bus. Hopefully we're not stuck behind it for a long time. But a lot of people are getting off at this stop. But if you look for stats on Florida City, you can't find updated stats, but because it was so bad prior to 2020 and then the city just stopped producing stats or stopped providing them to the FBI, I think the people that did the rankings for this probably are just basing it on the stats pre-2020. And if a city has been providing the stats to the FBI and then suddenly stops, you have to ask yourself, why would they suddenly do that? Because if it got better, more than likely they wouldn't be not providing the stats if things had gotten better. So you could almost only assume that it's gotten worse and significantly worse. But the 2020 numbers were, I mean, a murder rate of 81 and assault rates higher than Memphis, and you know, the theft rates at 8,000 per 100,000 people. It's just really high. So I'm just gonna film a little bit more here, and we'll let you see a little bit more of the city. I never did actually run into the downtown area, but we got to see a lot of the neighborhoods, which is what a lot of people like to see. Most people want to see what the houses look like and what the neighborhoods look like, if there's a bunch of garbage and graffiti. I haven't actually seen any graffiti, so in that regard they're doing pretty good here. And there were some transient homeless type looking people when we first pulled in, but for the most part there doesn't appear to be, at least, a lot of homeless here. And the roads are halfway decent. Those are the things I always look at when I go through these cities. Are the roads good, or are they filled with potholes? And the roads have been actually really good. No graffiti, not a lot of homeless. There is a lot of litter though, which is, it's kind of annoying when the city has so much garbage on the streets, because that's one of the simplest things to fix. And I had come across this story one time that this guy had done some survey or something, some research into something, and he said that criminals prefer it when there's a lot of litter around, because they figure if there's litter in your neighborhood, you're less likely to call the police on them if they do stuff. And so the litter, in his assessment of it, litter will actually, having it there will actually cause there to be more crime in an area, if his assessment is right. Which it kind of makes sense, because you go to a nicer neighborhood, if they come outside and there's a bunch of paper and stuff in there. Okay, so the GoPro just cut out again. Must have gotten heated up a little bit too much. So I'm gonna cut this off here, but I hope you enjoyed this drive through Florida City, the most dangerous city in the state of Florida.